Okay, welcome everyone. I am Kelly Burchill, a realtor here in South Tampa, and I am with my very good friend, Erik Hughes of Forge Building Company. And tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Erik.
Sure. Thanks for doing this, Kelly. Really excited to be here. So I am a custom home builder. I started out doing some remodels and custom homes. I think I've had my company about 8 years. And I've kind of transitioned to doing spec homes. So I typically buy properties, get the architecture done, build it, and then sell them. But I'm a South Tampa native, went to Plant High School, University of Florida. Yeah.
So today you get the advantage of two South Tampa natives, which I think is super important when we go into our topic about all these hurricanes, right? Because we have been through, we can't even count how many hurricanes we've been through, right? I might tear up. And we've been through nothing like we just went through.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember growing up here, like you said, we've been through a lot. I remember, I think it was 2004. We had a couple at the time we thought were bad ones. I was living on Davis Island at the time. And I remember the island was out of power for 7 or 10 days. And that was my kind of worst memory of hurricanes, but we didn't have the flooding like we did in Helene. So the damage was not bad back then. It was just an inconvenience because of the power outages, some downed trees. But Helene was the first time we've had a really bad storm surge that caused just widespread damage.
Right. If you think about it, we have been, obviously, if anybody knows anything about Tampa, so lucky, right? Mm-hmm. So lucky all the time. And really with these two, we were still pretty lucky.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's what we're here to talk to you guys about today. We really want to just kind of get into the damage that's been left behind from Helene and Milton. And I can give you my real estate perspective, and Erik's going to kind of talk to you about building and maybe a little bit about renovations and stuff like that. So I think we'll just get into it. I guess we can both kind of talk about what we've been seeing so far, sure. Right? So we're like, probably 2 weeks from Milton, and I don't even know. It was like the end of October or end of September for Helene, right? And I think that one was the one for most people in South Tampa, Davis Islands, Sunset Park, that whole area with the flood surge is what really did all the damage, right?
Yeah. And, even though here in Tampa, we are always at risk of hurricanes and we've been through them before, I think even a lot of the residents weren't expecting, they talk about storm surge on the news, right? And they have all those videos that they've prepared and kind of show you. But it took a lot of people by surprise because the storm came, the high winds came, and then it was late. I think it was a Thursday night. And I think the wind had almost started to subside, but then people started seeing this water slowly creeping up their properties, right? So it's a very odd thing to experience. And then it's just standing water. Some people I've talked to a lot of people who've had 18, 24, 30 inches of standing water in their house overnight.
In probably places that never flooded before.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right. Talk a little bit about, because I know you lived on Davis Islands. Mm-hmm. Tell me, that was the worst it's ever seen, right?
Yeah. I actually sold my home about 5 weeks ago, coincidentally. So I lucked out there. But there are a ton of those ranch homes on Davis Island still. A lot of new homes, but a ton of those ranch homes that are just built basically right on the ground. And Davis Island, like a lot of areas in South Tampa, the ground there is 6, maybe 7 feet above sea level. So it doesn't take much storm surge to cause flooding. I have a couple projects on Davis Island right now, and I got a really good image from my job site security camera on one of my projects. You can see we have a 6-foot chain link construction fence. You can see the water just at 11:30 p.m. that night was halfway up that fence. So I had 3 feet of standing water in my projects.
And that wasn't even high tide, by the way. It wasn't high tide, I think, like at 2 or 3 or something that morning.
Right. Yeah. So now, luckily, being a new construction project, were built up so high. So that 3 feet was just in that whole garage level. So it's all blocked. So we had zero damage, luckily. But you can imagine, and you've seen a lot of the damage from other people. The next morning, as soon as I could get on the island, I went over there and I just saw, I couldn't believe how much trash, drywall, furniture people had piled up against the curb. It's still there. The city is still working on picking it all up. But there are, hundreds of homes on Davis Island alone that got flooded.
So I think people outside of Tampa, but even people who are in sections of Tampa that didn't flood, I don't know, like Virginia Park or, I don't think they really get it because they don't. Like for me, living in Sunset Park, like I literally tear up every day just driving by the piles and piles and piles of trash.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy how certain areas can be so affected and devastated, and other people, it's like, oh gosh, I need to rake my yard,
Yeah, no, exactly. I checked in with obviously a number of my previous clients and buyers after the storm, and I built a couple homes in Bayshore Beautiful. You can step out of the front door and look down the street, and you see Bayshore Boulevard and you see the bay. That's how close you are. But that area of Bayshore Beautiful is kind of almost up on a hill, at least for Tampa standards.
Yeah.
So these properties, you're looking at Bayshore, but they're like 15 feet above sea level because of the grade there. They were fine. Their power was out, but like a lot of people, but no trace of water.
Right.
And then there's people much more inland than that, but they're lower. So the surge got them. So like you're saying, it's a lot of people who it was kind of hit or miss, but unfortunately it hit a lot of people.
Yeah. It's so crazy. So that's a good way to get into kind of like, I want to talk to you about building codes, but like, how do you even keep up with it? As far as how do builders keep up with it? I know you like do your research and study like crazy. But like, I don't know. It just, to the average person, the fact that like what you just said is a perfect example. You can see Bayshore and you're fine, but then you go inland and it's like street by street here, Yeah.
Well, that, the difference there is flood zones and elevations of your property. So if you're in a flood zone, a FEMA designated flood zone, and there's many types of flood zones, and even within a type of flood zone, like an AE zone, different areas have different base flood elevations that FEMA sets, and that's just dependent on your location. Basically their model of how it may flood in a storm like we had. So FEMA has a map, and you can look this up on their website and see. You can type in your address and see. I think we did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was super helpful.
Yeah, but basically, if you're in a flood zone, let's say the FEMA map says you're at AE 10. So you're in AE flood zone, and their base flood elevation is 10 feet. So your first living floor has to be 10 feet above sea level, not above the ground. So let's say, in a lot of, like we were just talking about, a lot of areas in South Tampa are low-lying. Let's say your grade, your dirt is at 6 feet. So that means you need to come up 4 feet to get to 10. However, that's FEMA's elevation. That's called the base flood elevation.
Okay.
The municipalities, like the city of Tampa, makes you go an extra foot. It's just as kind of a buffer. It's called that foot is called freeboard. So St. Pete makes you go 2 feet. So every municipality sets their own rules in that regard. So if FEMA says 10, Tampa says 11.
Okay.
So if your dirt is at 6, you actually have to build to 11, so 5 feet. So would it be a good idea for new construction to go even a little bit yeah, I've gotten that question a lot lately.
Like if the city says a foot, well, let's go 2, right? Is there any additional cost? Is there any negative to doing that?
Yeah, it depends. There can be. So now keep in mind, as far as I know, all the newer homes weren't affected by the flood, except the garage. Your garage is always going to be lower because that's exempt from, right? So, because we're talking living floor has to be elevated. So even in Helene, the new homes were fine flood-wise. But to answer your question more specifically, I get that. I just got that question the other day, again, obviously. there can be additional cost. You have a lot of things at play, as always in construction, right? How we often build here, you dig your footer and pour concrete underground, and then you have your block stem wall, which is the block wall that's going from underground up to that first living floor of that 11 feet, say, right?
Right.
So that's pretty tall, right? Because it starts underground.
Oh,
so we're
right.
talking 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 feet.
Okay.
And then after you block that, we bring in the dirt, the backfill, and fill it, and that's what you ultimately pour your slab on. Well, all that dirt exerts so much pressure on those block walls. The higher you go, the more dirt it is, the more pressure. So there is a point at which, and this is a calculation done by your engineer for the project, there is a point at which the stem wall is too tall and there's too much dirt so that it would not hold. So they'd have to beef up the engineering or go to a crawl space and do a suspended floor. So there's kind of a threshold where anything up to that is fine, but if you cross it, it can be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on a larger home.
Right.
Correct. So it's a, if you're designing a new home, it's definitely have that discussion with the architect and engineer because it is definitely a case-by-case decision.
What about, I have another question. I'm just throwing these out as they come, right? So if people who are in a ranch style home, and there are so many of them, they don't want to give up, right? And they're going to repair their house. Can you somehow make it waterproof? Other than the drywall, can you raise the electricity? What can they do to kind of lessen the damage the next time it floods?
Well, I mean, I guess you could do some things, but that's not going to. It would just be a minor fix, if that makes sense, because you're still going to have your floor still be on the ground, going to be on the ground. So if it floods again, all your wood floors are going to be ruined again. The bottom couple feet of your drywall, all that stuff. Even if you raise your outlets, which is going to be kind of odd, right? Yeah. You're still going to, your cabinets are still on the ground. You're still going to have the expensive things, you're still going to have. So if you are remodeling an old home like that got flooded, there's not really a lot, unfortunately, to do differently. Right.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about that because I feel like that's what I'm getting a lot of, right? Is the people in the old ranch style homes who are questioning, there's 3 options. You sell it, you renovate it and then sell it, or you tear down and build, right? Or renovate it and stay in it. And so many people, I think, are just kind of lost at that because obviously you have we can renovate it. And like my parents, they did that 4 times, right? And then finally gave up.
Yeah.
But there's so much that goes into that, right? Because not everybody wants to tear down and build. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, right? Even if you don't want to tear down and build, but if you did, okay, then you have to build a house that's big enough for the lot value, right? There's so much that goes into it.
You don't want to be in a negative equity situation. Yeah, and because there's so much that goes into it, and a lot of people are learning this for the first time. I've been telling people, I think a lot of these affected homeowners are going to be in this figure out mode or period for the next 1 to 3 or 4 or 5 months, really, before they wrap their head around it. Because right now, a lot of people are still salvaging their stuff. They're trying to find a rental, where to live. Their mind's not on the next step yet, especially these people who, thought they were going to be in their home forever, right? So over the next few months, a majority of these affected homeowners are going to be figuring out what their options are, and they're going to be learning a lot, right? So the first option you mentioned was sell. That's a lot of people's instinct right now because even just the stress, right? Some people some people don't want to figure out the options, and they're so traumatized and upset, right? But the problem is, the more people that think that way, the more inventory on the market, prices
so you
go
know,
down.
that's what you've heard me. That's
Yeah.
that's the thing I've been telling my clients is if you do not have to sell right now, don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because then, and like we spoke about, I think people in like 2 months, 3 months, right now they're waiting for their insurance check, right? And then once they get that, like, are all these houses going to come on the market and then prices drop, right? So.
Yeah. And coupled with that is your option number 2, which is remodel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then there's the swath of people who are going to think, I want to remodel, whether to stay in the home or, like you said, to sell it. What a lot of people are realizing or are going to realize are remodeling is not an option for everyone.
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about the FEMA rule now, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, God, this rule gets me.
Yeah,
Do you think, hold on, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you think that a lot of people know about this or not? Like, what would you think is the majority? I think
the only people who know about it, other than people in the industry, are those who have remodeled in a flood
right.
zone.
And I don't think that's a lot of people.
Right. So most people don't know about it. And, you know, just like you, I've gotten a number of calls in the last few weeks. And one of my first questions is, the people who mentioned remodel, I say, does the FEMA 50% rule ring a bell? And I just spoke to a gentleman yesterday, and he said, yeah, somebody tried to explain it to me, and I nodded my head like I was understanding it. You know, so I think that's a lot of people. They're starting to hear that that phrase.
Okay, can you get into that and tell us all about that?
Yeah. So this applies to homes in flood zones only. So it's a federal FEMA regulation, basically, that says if you're in a flood zone and you remodel your house, you can only put into the remodel 50% of the appraised value of the structure in 1 year.
Of the structure.
Unless you bring the whole home up to FEMA code, including the current elevation. Which you're not. Yeah.
Okay, you don't do that, right?
Yeah.
With a rancher house.
I've seen stuff on the internet. People are like,
raise my house.
Considering that, I don't know how that's going to work. But
so 50% of the structure.
Yeah. They let you do 60% if you use the public property appraisers number, because they kind of acknowledge that that's always low.
Okay.
Private appraisal is 50%.
Okay.
So you can go on the property appraiser's website. There's a section for the building and a section for the land.
This gets me. Because people go and they're like, oh, my house is worth $1.3 million.
And it may be, but that's not the structure. Usually a majority of it is the land. So I am not exaggerating when I tell you a lot of these ranch homes in South Tampa, the appraised value of the structure is $120,000, $130,000, $150,000.
Right.
So
60% of that.
Right. So 60% of 150 is $90,000. So, which, to some people may sound like a lot of money for a remodel, but the flooding, it's not like it was one room affected, right? Or half the home. It's the whole home. We're talking half the drywall, essentially, all the flooring, all the cabinets, a lot of the appliances. These are the expensive things in a home.
Right.
A lot of these homes, 90, or depending what you're allowed to spend, 60, 80, 90, aren't going to get you back to where you need to be. And the problem is, even if you do your $80,000 or $90,000 to get it halfway done, you have to wait 12 months, get it reappraised, and do it again. And even then, you can still only spend 50% of the new appraised value. So a very common scenario that a lot of these homeowners are going to run into is, even if they get a $200,000 insurance check, they may think, great, I needed $200,000 to remodel.
Right.
I've gotten quotes for $200,000. Well, if they didn't do their homework, they'll get to permitting, and the city will make you fill out this FEMA form. And if you put the cost of the remodel is $200,000, you're going to be denied for a permit. So even if you get insurance money, the city is going to say, and FEMA is going to say, you can't use it, essentially. Or you can use 80 of it or 90 of it, right? Whatever your 50% is.
So the FEMA rule has, just to be clear, has nothing to do with the amount you get back from insurance. Mm-mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the whole idea, I've heard people say, well, maybe FEMA will make an exception for a disaster, but the whole point of the rule is to prevent this. Right. They don't want you to spend a bunch of money on a home a very flood-prone home just for it to happen next year again,
Right.
and more insurance money goes out.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of these homeowners, like I said, they get, whether or not they get a big insurance check, they need to spend $200,000 to remodel it to get it back to where it was, whether to stay in it or to sell, but they're not allowed to. So what do? It's kind of an impossible situation, right? And that's where people are going to get stuck with selling it. Mm-hmm. Or if you have the ability to tear it down and rebuild, but that's not, it's probably not the majority, right? So if you can't do that, you're back to selling it.
Right.
To someone who's going to tear it down and rebuild it. So, and then that will then, cause a whole, there's going to be a ton of construction, obviously, right? And then that's going to come with some issues.
Increases in prices and stuff, or what do you mean?
Yeah. So I've been comparing what I think is going to happen back to what happened during COVID, and it's going to be similar but different. So during COVID was more of a material side problem, right? Because of the global supply chain that got affected. Right. And, labor is more of a local thing, right? So during COVID, a lot of materials were hard to get, or you couldn't get it, right? And then shipping became an issue. So materials were in short supply. And because of that, the prices skyrocketed, just absolutely crazy. Some things tripled, quadrupled, easy. But I think what's going to happen here, there may be some material shortages or cost increases because there's going to be so many people buying things here soon. I think that is going to be fixed pretty quickly because that's a local, regional issue.
And it's going to be
the suppliers,
right?
the suppliers, like a lot of lumber comes from Canada, right? I think they're just going to send more product here, right? I think that'll correct itself. But the issue here is going to be labor, local problem with a lot of construction, local labor force.
Right.
So, Tampa's been in a labor shortage for many, many, many years, well before COVID, many years before COVID. Now we're going to have a flood of new construction projects, no pun intended.
Right.
And, putting a strain on an already strained labor market. So, and I can speak from the builder's perspective, have all these new projects. So does every builder. We have the same subcontractors, the same labor, same amount typically. And those people every builder's going to want them. So they're going to be being pulled left and right. And so they're going to be harder to get. It might slow down construction for some people. And they're certainly going to be charging a lot more, just supply and demand.
Charging more to say, okay, come over here first. And is that how that works?
Some people, but I think just in general, even if it's not come here first, it's just the sheer volume of work, right? Yeah. So it's just, that much demand for work, the same labor pool. And, when I've told that to people, some people will say, oh, but there's going to be tons of labor coming from out of state or other parts of the state. And I'm like, well, there's only going to be so much, right? Those people also aren't familiar with Tampa and local codes, but also, okay, what about warranty?
I was going to say, do we want that?
Well, as a homeowner, you don't, generally because they come and do the work and it might be a temporary relief, but then, they're supposed to warrant, depending on the thing, maybe a year or two of warranty and then they're gone.
Yeah.
How's that going to work?
Right.
And they're not going to come back down from Georgia to fix your AC unit, so.
So I feel like that's a big thing too, is I'm so nervous about people getting taken advantage of.
Yeah.
I've already seen it with, oh my gosh, this story. So for instance, my neighbor across the street, she just wanted it done immediately, right? The first remediation company she could get in there, she did. I think she probably paid $35,000 or something, something insane. I had another client that I just
for 2 days of work.
Now, in their defense, they were there until midnight. They were good, but and then another great one is I went to a client's house just the other day, and a remediation company. Now, you got to keep in mind when you're talking to these companies, they're quoting you for the work that they want to do on your house, right? Yep. So that's a lot of the problem. So this family had a remediation come and say, oh, you got to rip the floors out and da-da-da. I had a Adam Danner with RSB came in and he was like, let's get some fans on this. I wouldn't touch those floors yet.
Yeah.
And like, so that kind of thing. And these people, they're just so desperate to do something quick because you hear about the mold and you know what I mean? And that's what really just makes me so nervous is so many people in this like urgent, desperate need to make decisions. And obviously we all know that's not the best place to be when you're trying to make decisions.
Yeah. And it's hard, not just, I mean, obviously the scare of mold is one thing, right? But also, you know, there's a lot of people worried that if they don't hire somebody right now, in a couple of days, they're all going to be booked, and then what, right? So, yeah, it's all around. It's a bad position to be in for a lot of these people. It's you know, and like we were talking about, that's the here and now. People are dealing with that and stressed with that, you know. And what we were talking about a few minutes ago was what happens next.
Let's go there. Let's go there with the lots.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'll start with, you know, I have 2 listed in Belmar Shore. They flooded with Helene. We signed the papers and got them on the market before Milton.
Yep.
And we listed those a little bit high. We listed them at $750. I'm just going to be honest here. They're probably before the storm $650. Actually, I have a very good comp that would put those at $650. I've gotten offers for $412. I did get an offer in the 6s, which was good, but I think we're all kind of seeing this and just waiting to see how it plays out, right?
Yeah. I've been asked by a number of people already, you know, what's my property worth, or people looking to buy properties. What is this property I'm looking at worth? And you know, I'm a very honest person when it comes to business and everything. You know, I tell them I wish I could tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, this just happened, right? It's going to take a while for the dust to settle on values. And again, this all ties back to people are figuring stuff out for the next few months, right? So as they figure it out, like I said, more properties are going to come to market. How many? We'll see. How desperate are people to just dump them and move on with their lives? What's the reaction from the buyer side, whether they're people looking to buy a lot to build their own home or investors, right, that are, I'm sure, coming in smelling some blood in the water, unfortunately. But you know, I think it's going to take a while to really figure out what the market is. I mean, you know, I started out by, you know, saying that I do a lot of spec homes. So I buy properties myself and build on it. I'm waiting because, you know, if I buy a lot for $800 a day and think it's a good deal, and then in 4 months it's really worth $600, and I, you know, didn't guess right, that's a problem because I'm going to sell the new product in just a year. I don't have like 5 years to sit on it and for values to rise again.
Right. So that's interesting because I every builder that I've talked to obviously has that same point of view, right? Like we don't know and we're just going to sit and wait, right? Because you guys don't need to buy anything right now. Right. So I wonder, so what does that mean for the homeowners that are trying to sell? It's either they have to hold it or they sell low to those investors that are coming in trying to swoop things up, right? I mean, they're not in a very good place.
Right. Yeah. And that goes back to your advice of if you don't have to sell, don't, right? Because if those people who don't have to sell do attempt to sell, that's just more inventory on the market, you know, giving buyers even more options, right? So I think your advice is good advice, not just for homeowners, but for the market in general, to keep values, you know, keep them as high as possible. But yeah, it's you know, not a great situation for the sellers right now. You know, again, I don't know how far down values are going to go. At some point, as there's price cuts and more inventory, at some point buyers are going to start making offers, and we're going to find that equilibrium of what are buyers okay buying it for, not knowing if it's going to go further down, compared to what are sellers, you know, willing to take for the property, you know, to get out of it sooner. So I think, again, in the next few months, we'll start to kind of see a kind of what the market shakes out to be.
So, what is playing devil's advocate here? Mm-hmm. The builder's the devil. No, I'm just I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. From your perspective, I mean, honestly, if lot prices go down, that's good for y'all, right? I mean, and let's be honest, lot prices in Tampa have been kind of insane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So is it really a bad thing altogether? Or?
Well, on the face, it's good because we're paying less for the properties. So it's, less cost to develop whatever we're developing. But what does that mean for the finished product when you go to sell it, right? So, because for builders who are selling homes, profit is not just what you buy the lot for and what your cost to build is, but what's it going to sell for at the end. Right. So I think that's, especially being a builder, I think one of the most interesting things to see is what is the, a year from now, in the next 1 to 3 years, what is the market for these new finished homes going to be like? Because, okay, we bought lots for cheaper. Maybe construction costs go up a little because of labor like we were talking about. But also we're probably going to have a lot of these new homes finished at the same time. So is that going to, keep prices down on the finished product, or are there going to be so many displaced people, but again, that's just as hard to figure out as current values are. So, it's, a lot of people think spec home development is very, very risky, or they've always said that in the past. I don't, because I know the market well, and I,
do the math.
But this is, I think, now going to be the most uncertain time, even for me, because it's so unpredictable.
But you know what? So you guys use the ratio, right? So if you go by that ratio of do you? You do. Like how much the land? Yeah. No? Listen, every time I ask this guy what he uses to price land, it's a different, it's all in your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I was going to say is if you use that and you're paying less for the land, doesn't it all just... you can't pay less for the land and then still get the same amount, would you?
I don't think... That's not the way I look at it, because, you buy the land now at whatever it is, right? But this is not going to be a normal time, right? So it's a very unique situation. And I go back to, it depends on, what you sell it for down the road is going to depend on a lot of things that we're not sure of. It's not just, because some people say a land is a third of the, right? Which sometimes it ends up being that way. Okay. And that's not always the case. But let's say,
but that's not what you base your...
Yeah, let's say, okay, for round numbers, if I were to buy a lot for $1 million today, one might say, when the home's done, it's worth $3 million or something. But again, the market a year or two from now, there's going to be so many things at play that are unpredictable. Like, okay, who are the people buying up most of these properties now? Are they end users who are just going to live in their homes? And there's not a lot of new homes on the market. Then it's probably going to be worth more than $3 million, right? Or is it all investors and builders building 100 spec homes that are all going to compete with each other and be finished within 6 months of each other? Then they're going to be worth less than $3 million. It could be a lot less. So, again, there's some people do use, a rule of thumb like that, but I think rules of thumb make more sense in normal times.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
Where you can base it off of history.
Right.
This is not like we said. There's not been an event like this in my lifetime here in Tampa. So, it's going to be. It's going to shake things up a lot, and I'm very interested to see what happens. And again, that's why I and a lot of other people are waiting, right? I think it would be unwise to jump in, even if you think you're getting a discount by $100,000 or $150,000 on a lot, because what if,
it's lower?
What if inventory triples in the next 6 months because all these people are selling? Well, now you're starting your project in the hole.
Yeah. So I guess that's the whole the whole moral of the story is we have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Which is kind of crazy.
Yep.
I guess before we wrap things up, do you think that is there anything that comes to your mind that people should know or?
I think, again, we talked about a lot of these people who are affected and learning all this stuff haven't been through a construction project before. We talked about some people remodeling is not going to be an option. For the people where remodeling or rebuilding is an option, I think it's very important for them to know the timeline that's going to be involved, because that should be a big factor in their decision. Again, people are going to take a little time to figure stuff out. Then you need to talk to builders. They're going to talk to their realtors, friends and family. There's this thing called plans and engineering, which
we have to do that
for the most part. That doesn't take 3 weeks. So, especially if you're building a new home, plans, totally depending on your architect, depending on you as well, of how much back and forth there is, how long you take to get back to the architect on revisions, how busy the market is of design. Because, don't forget, the first people to get busy are going to be like architects and engineers, right? Before contractors.
Yep.
So they're going to start getting busy. But that process can take, 6 months or more.
But now you're talking about if you're building like custom, right? What if somebody doesn't want to do that? They're like, I can't even fathom having to do that. Then they contact somebody like you, right? Maybe do you have a certain number of kind of homes that you could put on different lots, or that's more?
That's less common for custom home builders because at least here in South Tampa, our lots are pretty small.
Right.
Our properties are pretty small. So it's not like we're out, in the suburbs and everybody's building on an acre of land and you can just plop a plan. Here, right. So when we buy properties, we typically have to custom design from scratch for that property because, this lot's 75 feet wide instead of 85 and, 120 in the rear and then the easement and then this and that. And on Davis Island, aviation, height restriction, the FAA. So it's for a smaller custom home builder, you don't run into a lot of opportunities where you can reuse plans. Even if you can, sometimes I've found it's still not worth doing that because let's say, I have a property, I'm looking at a property that's 85 feet wide, right? And I recently designed and built a home that was designed for a 75-foot wide lot. Mm-hmm. Okay, it can fit, quote unquote.
But you're not.
But you're wasting, you're wasting so much real estate, really. And it's it's financially worth spending the time and money to design from scratch for this property. Okay. But, in this, to your point, in this situation, there will probably be more people who want to expedite the process. So I still, the builders typically own jointly with their architect the plans for a past project. So if somebody came to me and said, hey, I have this lot, do you have something? Or, hey, I saw you built this home down the street. Can we use that plan? You'd have to look into it. I think even if you can reuse it, there's still going to be some modifications, especially when it comes to the flood zone and elevation, right? So, a plan might fit perfectly on the lot, but on another area, you might have to come up a foot. Yeah. And come up a foot, well, now you have an extra 2 steps, which pushes out. So you might have to push the house back or make it a little shorter.
Got it.
There's, again, like we said, there's so many things at play. Yeah. So even if you can reuse a plan, there's still going to be a design process, maybe shorter.
Okay.
But it's for the most part, you're not going to, be able to find a plan like that from a builder and submit your permit application next week.
Okay. So what about people who are have decided, I'm tearing down my house. I need to build ASAP. What's the best, quickest? Where do they start? What do they do?
Well, the architecture, I would say the architecture is the first step, but really you need a few things before that. You need a current survey if you haven't gotten one, say, in the last year or so. And surveyors, a lot of my surveys are taking 2, 3, 4 weeks to get out and turnaround surveys. I always recommend soil testing,
Yep.
which is a few weeks. Then if you have trees, get those evaluated by an arborist. All those things can happen in parallel, but you're looking at probably a month of getting all that stuff ready. The architect needs a survey before they can do anything. Then, you start on design with your architect or design professional. And again, that can take, depending on your home and the architect and you and all that. I mean, it can take 3 months, it can take 6 months, it can take 8 months. It's very case by case. Engineering on top of that, say another few weeks or month. And then permitting, call it 6 weeks in the city of Tampa. City of Tampa is usually not that bad. Some municipalities are worse. And then the construction, which is the longest part, of course. So again, depending on the size and complexity of the home, the capacity of the builder.
So there is no quick answer.
No, not really. The only quick answer is buying something existing that didn't get flooded, right? So, there's still, a number of homes that are in the construction pipeline right now. So there's still going to be some new inventory coming online, but not enough for, the masses here that got flooded.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so people can let people know how to contact you if they have any questions or want to talk to you.
We have I changed the splash page of my website to a contact form in the wake of the hurricane. So that's just forgebuildingco.com, or you can email info@forgebuildingco.com. It comes directly to me. I'm very responsive, but I'm happy to, talk to people, point them in the right direction, even if the direction is not me or my company. If it is a fit, we can talk from there. But I've helped a lot of people already kind of get started and get the process rolling. And
I was just going to say, I second that. Eric is great about, he'll come out. You just came out to a property with me just to give people ideas and talk through things, and super helpful. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Of course, yeah.
And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
See what happens,
Might
right?
have to do a sequel in a couple months to see how the market is, see if any of our predictions have come true.
I hope not. Yeah. I'm hoping everything just kind of hangs tight.
Yeah, me too.
We'll definitely be back. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly.